Have you ever stood in a moment where your faith costs you everything? When the very beliefs that sustain your soul become the reason you lose your livelihood? This story delves into that crushing weight of standing for truth when the world demands compromise, yet it carries within it a message of forgiveness so profound that it might forever change how you see those who hurt you most deeply. The silver cross caught morning light through penthouse windows. Grace Whitmore adjusted her black and white uniform one final time before entering the master suite, her 23-year-old hands steady despite the weight of what she carried in her apron pocket. 3 years she had served in this 42nd floor sanctuary of glass and marble. 3 years of silent prayers while dusting awards that celebrated everything except the one who gave all talent. Victoria Sterling sat at her vanity, her reflection multiplied in triple mirrors, each showing a different angle of perfection that millions adored. At 38, she had conquered Broadway, dominated streaming series, and commanded 7 figures per episode. Her navy dress spoke power, her posture proclaimed victory, yet something in her eyes reminded Grace of wounded birds she used to rescue as a child in Tennessee. "Grace, did you organize my scripts?" The voice cut through morning silence like crystal breaking. "Yes, Miss Sterling. They're arranged by filming date on your desk." Grace moved through familiar routines, straightening surfaces that barely needed attention, aware of the letter burning against her ribs. 3 weeks she had carried it. 3 weeks since finding it crumpled behind the bookshelf while deep cleaning. Not her business, not her concern, except the signature had stopped her cold. "Your loving mother, always believing, always praying, Helen." The morning proceeded with practiced efficiency until Victoria's phone shattered the rhythm. Grace caught fragments of conversation, saw color drain from her employer's carefully made-up face, watched manicured fingers tremble as they ended the call. "Bad news?" The question escaped before Grace could stop it. Victoria's eyes snapped to her, sharp as winter. "Since when do you ask personal questions?" "I apologize. I only thought—" "You thought wrong. You're hired to clean, not counsel." Silence stretched between them, thick as honey, until Grace's fingers found the cross at her throat, an unconscious gesture that had sustained her through countless difficult moments. Victoria tracked the movement, her expression hardening further. "That trinket again. Do you know how primitive you look, clutching superstition in the 21st century? It's not superstition, Miss Sterling. It's faith." "Faith." Victoria spat the word like spoiled wine. "Faith in fairy tales and ancient myths. Faith that keeps people passive while the world burns. Faith that tells women to accept suffering as divine will." Grace's spine straightened, something fierce and protective rising in her chest. "With respect, Miss Sterling, faith gives strength when the world offers none. Faith sees beauty where others see ashes. Faith killed my mother." The words hung between them like a blade. Victoria stood, her full height commanding the room, designer heels clicking against Italian marble as she approached. She refused treatment, said her imaginary friend in the sky would heal her if it was his will. Spent her last months praying instead of fighting. "So forgive me if I find your little cross offensive." Grace's hand dropped from her necklace, her heart breaking, for the pain radiating from the woman before her. "I'm so sorry about your mother. I don't want your pity. I want you out." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Pack your things. I won't have religious delusion in my home. Human resources will mail your final check." The dismissal hit like physical force. 3 years of perfect service ended in moments. Grace's mind raced through rent due in 5 days, her sister's medical bills, the groceries she'd need to return. Pride screamed to defend herself, to fight back, to demand fairness. Instead, she reached into her pocket. "Before I go, this belongs to you." She placed the letter on the vanity, her mother's handwriting facing up. Victoria's face went white, then red, then something beyond color. "Where did you get this?" "Behind the shelf. I wasn't snooping, I was cleaning. I've carried it for weeks, trying to find the right moment." "Get out, now, get out!" Grace gathered her few personal items from the service closet, each movement deliberate despite trembling hands. The elevator descended 42 floors while tears finally came, silent and steady, salt on her lips as she emerged into Manhattan's indifferent afternoon. Her studio apartment in Queens felt smaller after the penthouse's expanse. One room, one window, one chair where she collapsed, still wearing the uniform she'd never wear again. The cross pressed against her chest as she leaned forward, elbows on knees, and did the only thing she knew to do. She prayed, not for herself, though fear gnawed at her edges, not for justice, though wrongness burned in her throat. She prayed for Victoria Sterling, for the woman drowning in grief disguised as success, for the daughter who blamed Faith for losing her mother, for the soul so wounded it struck at anything resembling hope. Evening painted her window purple and orange while she sat in gathering darkness, no energy to turn on lights, no appetite for the pasta in her cabinet. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from her sister Ruth, probably wondering about the money Grace usually sent. Tomorrow she'd have to explain. Tonight she could only sit with the weight of loss. Thunder woke her at 2:47 in the morning. She'd fallen asleep in the chair, neck stiff, still in uniform. Rain hammered her window like desperate fingers, while lightning split the sky in jagged pieces. The storm felt appropriate, nature reflecting the chaos in her chest. Then came the knocking. First soft, almost lost in thunder, then harder, frantic, the sound of someone fighting panic. Grace approached her door with caution. This neighborhood didn't invite midnight visitors. Through the peephole, she saw something impossible. Victoria Sterling stood in her hallway, designer dress soaked through, makeup running in black rivers down her cheeks, her entire body shaking with something beyond cold. Grace opened the door without thinking, instinct overriding hurt. "Miss Sterling." "I can't breathe." The words came out broken, barely audible. "I can't breathe, and I can't stop seeing her face, and her letter, she said she wasn't afraid, and how could she not be afraid when she was dying, and I wasn't there. I was filming in Vancouver, and I wasn't there. Come inside. You're freezing." She guided Victoria to the chair, grabbed her only towel, knelt beside the woman who had fired her 12 hours earlier. Up close, she could see the terror in Victoria's eyes, the kind that came from touching something infinite and finding yourself infinitely small. "I read it 17 times, my mother's letter. She wrote about peace. Peace. While cancer ate her bones, she wrote about peace. How is that possible?" Grace stayed quiet, rubbing warmth back into Victoria's hands, letting silence hold space for grief. "She wrote about you." "What?" "Not you, specifically. But she wrote that she prayed I'd find someone who could show me what she couldn't, someone whose faith wasn't words, but presence. When I saw you today, holding that cross while I raged, not defending yourself, not fighting back, just standing there with such sadness for me, not yourself." Victoria's voice broke completely. "I fired you, and you looked at me with compassion. You were hurting. I'm always hurting. Every day since she died, I'm furious at the disease, at the doctors, at her, at the God she loved more than life. But tonight, reading her words again, seeing her handwriting, remembering how she smiled even at the end." Victoria looked up, mascara stained and stripped of all pretense. "I need to understand. How do you believe in something that allows such suffering?" Grace moved from her knees to sit cross-legged on the floor, still holding Victoria's hands. Outside, thunder rolled like distant drums, while she searched for words that wouldn't be trite, wouldn't minimize the valley of shadow this woman walked. "I don't believe because life is easy. I believe because in the hardest moments I'm not alone. When my parents died in a car accident when I was 15, when my sister was diagnosed with lupus, when I lost job after job during the pandemic." "You lost your parents?" "Drunk driver. They were coming home from Bible study." Grace's smile held tears. "I was so angry. Spent months screaming at the sky, demanding answers. Know what I learned? He's big enough for our anger, big enough for our questions, big enough to hold us while we rage. Victoria pulled her hands free, wrapping them around herself. My mother never raged, she just accepted it. Maybe that was her way of fighting. Maybe surrender was her victory. That makes no sense. Does anything about love make sense? Why do we choose to care when caring hurts? Why do we hope when hope disappoints? Why do we forgive when forgiveness costs everything? Lightning illuminated the room in stark relief, showing Victoria's face transformed by something between anguish and wonder. She forgave me, in the letter, forgave me for not visiting, for choosing career over her care, for saying terrible things when she refused treatment. She said she understood, said love covers all, said she'd wait for me on the other side. Victoria's shoulders shook with fresh sobs. How could she forgive what I can't forgive in myself? Grace rose, retrieved a glass of water from her tiny kitchen, placed it in Victoria's trembling hands. Maybe forgiveness isn't about deserving. Maybe it's about releasing. Your mother released you because holding on would have poisoned her last days with bitterness. She chose love over justice. Like you did today. I haven't, you have. I destroyed your livelihood out of pain and prejudice. I took your dignity, your stability, your income, yet you let me in. You're kneeling beside me, offering comfort. Why? Grace touched the cross at her throat, its weight familiar as breathing. Because someone did it for me once. Because mercy multiplies when we pass it on. Because you're worth more than your worst moment. Victoria set down the water, slid from chair to floor, sitting face to face with the woman she'd wronged. I came here to ask you something insane. Ask. Teach me to pray. The words hung between them like a bridge over churning water. Grace saw the cost of the request in Victoria's eyes, the humiliation of admitting need, the vulnerability of seeking what she'd scorned. I don't know pretty prayers, Grace warned. I just talk. Then talk, please. Grace took Victoria's hands again, feeling their coldness, their tremor, their desperate grip. She closed her eyes and spoke to the one who knew both their hearts, their wounds, their wandering paths toward home. Here we are, broken and searching. Here we are, angry and afraid. We don't understand the suffering, don't understand the silence, don't understand why love hurts so much. But we're here, together, two strangers made sisters by grief, asking for what we can't name. Give us peace that makes no sense. Give us strength we didn't earn. Give us grace to forgive ourselves as freely as we've been forgiven. Hold Victoria as she grieves her mother. Show her that faith isn't about having answers, but about being held through questions. Amen. When she opened her eyes, Victoria was weeping differently. Not the jagged sobs of before, but something deeper, quieter, like rain after thunder passes. That's it? Just talking? That's it. My mother used to pray over breakfast, over skinned knees, over lost puppies, over everything. I thought it was weakness. But maybe. Victoria wiped her face with the towel, smearing the last of her makeup. Maybe it was the bravest thing she did, admitting she couldn't control everything. They sat in comfortable silence while the storm gentled outside, rain softening from assault to lullaby. Finally, Victoria spoke again, voice steady but small. There's something else. The phone call yesterday, it was my doctor. Grace's chest tightened. Are you sick? Ovarian, stage 2, caught early, good prognosis, but... Victoria laughed bitterly. Ironic, isn't it? I spent 5 years hating my mother for not fighting, and now I understand the exhaustion that makes you want to quit before you start. But you won't quit. How do you know? Because you're here. Because you knocked on my door. Because somewhere under all that pain, hope is still breathing. Victoria studied Grace's face like she was memorizing it. I fired you. You did. I want to hire you back. Double the salary. Grace shook her head slowly. I can't. Triple. It's not about money, Miss Sterling. If I come back, it has to be different. I can't hide who I am, can't pretend my faith doesn't exist. I won't preach at you, won't force anything on you, but I won't hide either. I wouldn't want you to. I think I think I need to see it. Daily faith, lived out in small moments. My mother tried to explain it, but I wasn't ready to hear. Maybe I can learn by watching. Grace felt the pull of it, the temptation to say yes immediately, but wisdom whispered caution. Pray about it first. I don't know how to pray alone. Then practice. Spend 3 days talking to the ceiling, to the sky, to whatever you can manage. On the 4th day, call me. If you still want me back, we'll talk terms. Victoria stood, Grace rising with her. They faced each other in the small apartment, employer and employee, wounded and healer, lost and found, the space between them holy with possibility. Your mother's letter, Grace said suddenly. Did she have a favorite scripture? Something about strength in weakness never made sense to me. 2 Corinthians. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And maybe that's what she wanted you to know, that admitting weakness isn't defeat. It's the beginning of true strength. Victoria moved toward the door, paused with her hand on the knob. What if I pray wrong? What if I can't find the words? Remember what your mother wrote. She wasn't afraid. Not because dying was easy, but because she wasn't alone. You're not alone either, Victoria. Even when you can't feel it, you're not alone. The door closed softly, leaving Grace in the pre-dawn quiet. She returned to her chair, pulled a blanket around her shoulders, and waited for sunrise. 3 days to wait, 3 days to wonder if Victoria would call, 3 days to trust that seeds planted in storm-soaked soil might find their way to light. The call came at exactly 72 hours. Grace had spent the time cleaning apartments for cash, visiting Ruth, trying not to check her phone every 5 minutes. When Victoria's number appeared, her heart stammered. Grace? I'm here. I prayed. It was awkward and messy, and I cried through most of it, but I prayed, and something happened. What happened? I can't explain it. Peace, maybe, like someone wrapped a blanket around my soul. Is that crazy? That's faith. I want you back, not just as an employee, as a friend, as a teacher, as someone who can help me understand what my mother knew. Will you come? Grace thought of the comfortable distance she could maintain, the safety of saying no, the wisdom of avoiding complicated entanglements. Then she thought of Victoria's face in the lightning, the desperation of someone drowning reaching for any hand, even one she'd slapped away. When do I start? Tomorrow. Today. Now. Tomorrow. And Victoria? Yes? We're going to get through this. The cancer, the grief, the questions, we're going to get through it together. Silence stretched across the connection, filled with tears and gratitude and the first fragile notes of hope. My mother would have loved you, Victoria whispered. She already did. She prayed for you to find someone like me, remember? Her prayers are still being answered. The next morning, Grace stood again in the penthouse elevator, wearing the same uniform but carrying something different. In her pocket, next to her mother's Bible, lay a small card Victoria had left at her door after their call. For Grace, who taught me that mercy multiplies. With love and terrible handwriting, Victoria. The elevator doors opened to revelation. Victoria stood in the foyer, no makeup, hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a Columbia University sweatshirt. She looked younger, softer, like someone who'd set down armor she'd worn too long. I thought we should start differently this time, Victoria said, extending her hand. Hello, I'm Victoria Sterling. I'm scared, I'm sick, I'm learning to pray, and I desperately need a friend. Grace took the offered hand, shook it firmly, then pulled Victoria into an embrace that surprised them both. Hello, Victoria. I'm Grace Whitmore. I'm broke, I'm faithful, I sometimes doubt everything, and I'd be honored to be your friend. They stood there, two women from different worlds, holding each other while morning light blessed their beginning. Somewhere, Grace thought, a mother's prayer was singing hallelujahs. The oncologist's office smelled of disinfectant and fear. Grace sat beside Victoria in the waiting room, watching her employer's hands twist in her lap like wounded birds. 3 weeks had passed since their reconciliation. 3 weeks of tentative friendship blooming alongside treatment plans and insurance paperwork. Mr. Harrison, a nurse called out. An elderly man rose, shuffled toward his fate. Victoria tracked his movement with haunted eyes. "He's alone," she whispered. "We don't know that. Someone might be parking, or someone might have stopped coming. How many treatments before people get tired of waiting rooms?" Grace reached over, stilled Victoria's restless hands with her own steady ones. "We'll find out together. You can't promise that. You have your own life. Your sister needs you." "Ruth understands. We actually talked about you last night." "You did? She wants to meet you. Says anyone who can go from firing me to crying on my floor in 12 hours must be interesting." Victoria's laugh surprised them both, bright in the sterile space. "Interesting. That's one word for it. Miss Sterling?" Another nurse, another door, another step toward uncertainty. Dr. Patricia Reeves had kind eyes and terrible news. The cancer had spread slightly, requiring aggressive chemotherapy before surgery. She outlined timelines, statistics, side effects with clinical precision, while Victoria's face went progressively paler. "You'll lose your hair," the doctor said gently. "Most patients find it helpful to cut it short before treatment starts. Take control of the process." Victoria's hand flew to her signature waves, the hair that had graced magazine covers and red carpets. "All of it?" "Most likely, but it grows back. Different sometimes, but it returns." They left with pamphlets, prescriptions, and a first appointment that loomed like a storm system on clear radar. In the car, Victoria stared straight ahead while Grace navigated Manhattan traffic. "I'm being punished." "What?" "For mocking faith. For firing you. For missing my mother's death. This is cosmic justice." Grace pulled into a parking garage, found a space, turned to face Victoria fully. "That's not how it works." "Then how does it work? Good people suffer, bad people prosper, and we're all just supposed to pretend there's meaning in chaos." "You're not bad people, Victoria." "I'm not good either. None of us are. That's kind of the point. We're all broken, all stumbling, all desperately in need of grace. Cancer isn't punishment. It's just broken biology in a broken world." Victoria leaned her head against the window, breath fogging glass. "My mother said something similar, said creation groans, waiting for restoration. I thought it was poetic nonsense. What do you think now?" "I think I hear the groaning. In my bones, in my blood, in every cell that's betraying me. But I don't hear restoration." Grace started the car again, pulled back into traffic. "Sometimes restoration whispers. Sometimes it looks like friends in waiting rooms, strangers becoming family, finding strength you didn't know existed." That evening, Victoria stood before her bathroom mirror with scissors in her hand. Grace sat on the counter, watching her employer struggle with the weight of sharp edges. "Tell me about your parents," Victoria said suddenly. "Why now?" "Because if I'm going to cut my hair, I need to think about something else. Distract me." Grace understood the kindness in the request, the gift of being needed. They were teachers. Dad taught history, Mom taught music. They met at a faculty meeting, argued about funding for their departments, fell in love over coffee and grudges. "Sounds romantic." Victoria lifted a section of hair, let it fall. "They were ridiculous. Dad would leave notes in Mom's lunch bag. Mom would play piano at 3 in the morning when inspiration struck. They embarrassed Ruth and me constantly with their public affection." "You were lucky." "I was. 15 years wasn't enough, but it was more than some get." Victoria made the first cut. A long strand fell into the sink like surrendered pride. "Keep talking." "They died on a Tuesday. Ordinary Tuesday in March. Nothing special about it except it was the last day they lived. I was angry at them that morning for not letting me go to a party, said things I couldn't take back." Another cut, another strand. Victoria's eyes stayed fixed on Grace's reflection. "What things?" "That I hated them, that they were ruining my life, that I wished I had different parents." "You were 15. Doesn't make it hurt less, knowing those were my last words to them." Victoria paused, scissors hovering. "How did you forgive yourself?" "Still working on it. But I remember that they knew I loved them. Under the teenage anger they knew. Love sees past harsh words to true hearts." More cuts, hair accumulating like small surrenders. Victoria's face changed as weight lifted from her shoulders, became something fierce and fragile simultaneously. "There," she said finally. "It's done." The pixie cut revealed the architecture of her face, the strength in her jaw, the vulnerability in her eyes. She looked like a warrior who'd chosen her battle. "You're beautiful," Grace said simply. "I'm terrified." Those aren't mutually exclusive. The first chemotherapy session arrived wrapped in false cheer from nurses who'd seen too much. Victoria sat in the recliner, IV connected, poison entering her veins to fight poison already there. Grace sat beside her, reading aloud from a book Ruth had recommended. "This is boring," Victoria interrupted after 10 pages. "It's a classic." "It's still boring. Talk to me instead." "About what?" "About praying. I've been trying, but it feels like talking to air. How do you know anyone's listening?" Grace set down the book, considered her words carefully. "You know how sometimes you can feel someone watching you? Like presence without sight. Prayer feels like that reversed, like you're the one watching, and suddenly you realize you're being seen back. That sounds terrifying. Sometimes it is. Being fully known, fully seen, nowhere to hide. But it's also the safest feeling in existence, because the one seeing you already loves everything you're ashamed of." Victoria closed her eyes as medication dripped steady rhythm. "Read the boring book. I can't process philosophy while being poisoned." 3 hours later, they drove home in silence. Victoria made it to the penthouse bathroom just in time, retching while Grace held what remained of her hair, rubbed her back, whispered comfort, neither fully believed. "This is humiliating," Victoria gasped between waves of nausea. "This is human. I hate being human." "I know." That night, Grace stayed over for the first time, sleeping on the couch in case Victoria needed her. At 3 in the morning, she woke to find her employer standing by the windows, silhouetted against city lights. "Can't sleep. Can't stop thinking. About my mother, going through this alone." She wasn't alone. She didn't have anyone holding her hair while she threw up. She had nurses, hospice workers, church friends, not the same as family. "I should have been there." Grace joined her at the window, their reflections ghost-like in glass. "You're here now, fighting the same battle. Maybe that honors her more than being there would have." "You think she knows? I think love transcends more than we understand. I think your mother's prayers are still working, still bringing you exactly what you need when you need it." Victoria turned from the window, studied Grace's face in darkness. "I needed you, specifically you, not just any person of faith, but you, with your quiet strength and your parents' tragedy and your sister's illness and your ability to see past my worst self. Maybe we needed each other. Maybe your mother prayed for both of us." They stood there, 2 silhouettes against the glittering city, holding space for mysteries too large for words. Treatment cycles blurred together like watercolors in rain. Good days when Victoria could work, bad days when she couldn't leave bed, terrible days when death felt preferable to fighting. Grace moved into the guest room officially, her presence constant as breath. Ruth visited on a good day, wheeling in with the confidence of someone who'd faced mortality and chosen joy. The 2 women sized each other up like cats, circling with careful interest. "So you're the one who fired my sister," Ruth said cheerfully. "So you're the one who needs her income," Victoria replied. They stared at each other for a long moment, then burst into simultaneous laughter. "I like her," Ruth told Grace. "She's mean in the right way." "I like her," Victoria said. "She doesn't treat me like I'm fragile." "You're not fragile," Ruth said. "You're in process. Big difference." That afternoon, while Grace prepared lunch, she heard Ruth and Victoria talking quietly in the living room, catching fragments about fear, faith, and the strange comfort of finding fellow travelers in the Valley of Shadows. "Your sister's teaching me to pray," Victoria said. "Good luck with that. She prays like she cooks, lots of heart, questionable technique." "I heard that," Grace called from the kitchen. "You were meant to," Ruth called back. Victoria's laugh rang out, real and unforced. The sound of someone remembering joy was possible. The worst day came 6 weeks into treatment. Victoria woke screaming from pain that medication couldn't touch, her body convulsing with rebellion against the cure that felt like curse. Grace called the oncologist, held Victoria through the shaking, prayed words that felt useless as tissue paper against hurricane. "Make it stop," Victoria begged. "Please make it stop." "I can't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't." "Then pray. If you can't make it stop, at least pray." Grace prayed aloud for the first time in Victoria's presence. Not careful words, but desperate ones. A mother's cry for a suffering child, a friend's plea for mercy. She prayed until her voice went hoarse, until Victoria's shaking eased, until exhaustion claimed them both. When Victoria woke hours later, she found Grace still there, still holding her hand. Tear tracks dried on both their faces. "You stayed. Where else would I go? Anywhere but here. This isn't what you signed up for." "I signed up to be your friend. This is what friends do." Victoria squeezed the hand holding hers, weak but determined. "I felt it." "Felt what?" "The presence you talked about. During the pain, when you were praying, I felt held. Not fixed, not healed, but held." "Is that what faith is?" "That's exactly what faith is." The letter came on a Tuesday, slipped under the penthouse door like any ordinary mail. Grace found it first, recognized the handwriting from forms she'd filed. Victoria's assistant from the network, the one who'd been mysteriously absent since the diagnosis. "Victoria, Melissa left something." Victoria emerged from her bedroom, weak but mobile, wearing one of the head wraps Ruth had gifted her. She took the envelope with trembling fingers, read silently while Grace pretended to clean already spotless surfaces. "She's been spreading rumors," Victoria said finally, "about my condition, my appearance, my ability to fulfill contracts. The network's considering replacement. They can't do that. They can. Morality clause, health requirements, bunch of legal loopholes." Victoria crumpled the letter, then smoothed it out again. "She says she's trying to protect the show's integrity. She's trying to steal your job. Same thing in this industry." Victoria moved to the couch, sat heavily. "I should be angry. You're not. I'm tired. Too tired to fight for something that feels meaningless now. What's a television show compared to keeping food down?" Grace sat beside her, close but not touching. "Your work meant something to people. Did it, or did it just fill time between commercials? You made people laugh, cry, think. That's not nothing." Victoria leaned back, closed her eyes. "My mother wanted me to use my platform for something bigger, said talent came with responsibility. I told her entertainment was enough, that making people forget their troubles was a kind of ministry. Maybe it is. Or maybe I was a coward, avoiding anything that might cost me popularity." She opened her eyes, looked at Grace directly. "I want to do something that matters. If I survive this, I want my life to mean something. You will survive. You don't know that. I choose to believe it. Based on what evidence?" Grace thought of all the platitudes she could offer, all the reassurances that might ring hollow. Instead, she spoke truth. "Based on nothing but hope. Sometimes that's all we get. The audacious courage to hope without guarantee." Victoria was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "My mother would have liked you so much. Tell me about her." For the next hour, Victoria talked about Helen Sterling née Patterson, kindergarten teacher turned prayer warrior, woman who baked cookies for neighborhood kids and secretly paid strangers' grocery bills. She talked until her voice grew rough, until tears came freely, until the ghost of her mother filled the room with benediction. "She wasn't perfect," Victoria concluded. "She had doubts, fears, moments of weakness. But she chose faith anyway, every single day. That's what makes it brave. I want to be brave like that, not the pretend bravery of red carpets and tough characters, but real courage, the kind that admits need." That night, Victoria asked Grace to pray with her instead of for her. They knelt beside the couch, two women holding hands in the dark, speaking words into mystery, and finding mystery spoke back in the language of peace. The scan results came back better than hoped. Tumors shrinking, markers dropping, the possibility of surgery moving from distant hope to scheduled reality. Dr. Reeves smiled for the first time in months. "You're responding beautifully. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." In the elevator afterward, Victoria started laughing. Not bitter laughter, but something bright and incredulous. "What's funny?" She said, "Whatever you're doing, like I'm doing anything but surviving. You're doing more than that." "What?" "You're transforming. Every day you're choosing to become instead of just endure." Victoria pressed the emergency stop button, turned to Grace in the small, suspended space. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." "I love you." The words hung between them, weighty with meaning that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with recognition. "Not in a weird way," Victoria rushed to clarify, "but like, you're my sister now. The family I chose, or that chose me, or that my mother prayed into existence. I love you, and I need you to know that before surgery, in case, I love you too. And there's no in case. We're going to get through surgery, recovery, and whatever comes after. Together." Victoria released the button, let the elevator continue its descent. "Promise?" "I promise to try. That's all any of us can promise." Surgery day dawned grey and uncertain. Grace arrived at the hospital before visiting hours, talked her way past security with combination of charm and determination. She found Victoria in pre-op, smaller somehow in the hospital gown, all pretense stripped away. "You came early." "Couldn't sleep." "Neither could I. Kept thinking about my mother's last surgery, the one she never woke up from. This is different." "Is it? Same hospital, same floor, probably same operating room?" Grace pulled the visitor's chair close, took Victoria's hand between both of hers. "Want to pray? I want you to give me something." "What?" Victoria pointed to Grace's neck. "Your cross. Let me wear it during surgery. They won't allow jewelry." "Then I'll hold it. Please. I need something tangible, something that's been where I'm going and survived." Grace unclasped the necklace she'd worn since childhood, placed it in Victoria's palm, watched fingers close around it like capturing light. "This belonged to my mother," Grace said quietly. "She wore it the night she died. The paramedics gave it back to me at the hospital." Victoria's eyes widened. "I can't." "Yes, you can. It's been through the worst and still holds faith, like you will." "Lily." The anesthesiologist arrived, started preparations. Grace stood to leave, but Victoria caught her wrist. "If something happens, nothing will happen. But if it does, tell my mother I understand now. Tell her I finally understand. Tell her yourself, when you're 97 and tired of my preaching." Victoria smiled as medication took hold, fingers still wrapped around the cross. Grace stayed until they wheeled her away, then found the chapel and did what she'd learned to do in every impossible moment. She waited, she trusted, she prayed. 7 hours. 7 hours of pacing, praying, drinking terrible coffee, fielding texts from Ruth, and trying not to imagine worst cases. When Dr. Reeves finally appeared, still in surgical scrubs, Grace nearly collapsed from relief at her smile. "We got it all. Clean margins, no visible spread." She did beautifully. Grace sank into the nearest chair, tears coming fast and grateful. "When can I see her?" "She'll be in recovery for another hour, then move to ICU. Family only for the first." "I'm family. I'm her sister." Dr. Reeves studied Grace's face, perhaps seeing truth that transcended blood. "Room 412. Give her time to wake fully." Victoria emerged from anesthesia slowly, like swimming up from great depth. Grace watched her return to consciousness, saw confusion yield to recognition, then to wonder. "You're here. Where else would I be?" Victoria lifted her hand, showing the cross still clutched there, imprinted into her palm from holding so tightly. "I dreamed about her, my mother. She said she was proud of me. She should be. She said something else." Victoria's voice was rough, barely whisper. "Said to thank you for being the answer to prayers she didn't live to see fulfilled." Grace leaned close, smoothed hair from Victoria's forehead with gentle fingers. "Rest now. I'll be here when you wake." Promise? Promise. Recovery stretched through winter into spring, marked by small victories and smaller setbacks. Victoria learned to walk again with Grace's support, first down hospital halls, then around the block, finally through Central Park as cherry blossoms painted the world in hope. The network released her from contract with minimal fuss, Melissa having overplayed her hand and lost credibility. Victoria accepted the news with equanimity that surprised everyone but Grace. "I'm done with that world," she said, watching sunset from her penthouse. "I want to do something real." "Like what?" "I don't know yet. Something that helps people facing what we faced, what we're still facing." The idea came during a follow-up appointment, sitting in the same waiting room where their journey began. A young woman sat alone, crying quietly into her hands, diagnosis fresh and terrible on her shoulders. Victoria moved without thinking, sat beside the stranger, offered tissues and presents. They talked for 40 minutes while Grace watched her friend transform into what she'd been becoming all along. Someone who understood suffering and chose to alleviate it in others. "We should start a program," Victoria said afterward, "pairing survivors with newly diagnosed patients. Not medical advice, just presence. Someone who's been through the valley walking beside someone just entering." "That's beautiful. Will you help me?" "Always." They launched Walking Together 6 months later, using Victoria's remaining funds and connections to create something unprecedented. A ministry disguised as medical support, faith wearing the clothes of practical help. Ruth designed the website from her wheelchair, insisting on accessibility for all abilities. Grace coordinated volunteers, many from the church she'd started attending with Victoria. Victoria herself became the face of hope, her pixie cut growing into silver-threaded waves she chose not to die. "Badge of honor," she said, when tabloids commented on her transformed appearance. "Every grey hair is a day I survived." The first anniversary of diagnosis found them in the penthouse, sharing Chinese takeout and looking through letters from program participants. Hundreds of stories of connection, hope found in unexpected places, strangers becoming family through shared struggle. "Read that one again," Victoria pointed to a handwritten note. Grace read aloud. "Thank you for showing me that faith isn't about avoiding storms, but about finding anchor in them. My walking partner has become my best friend, my chosen sister, my evidence that prayers get answered in ways we don't expect. With love, Rebecca." Victoria raised her water glass in toast. "To unexpected answers. To mothers who pray for daughters they'll never see healed. To daughters who finally understand." They clinked glasses. Two women who'd found each other in the valley and chosen to build gardens there. "I want to visit her grave," Victoria said suddenly. "My mother's. I haven't been since the funeral." "When?" "Tomorrow. Will you come?" "Of course." Helen Sterling's headstone read simply, "Beloved mother, teacher, friend. Her faith lives on." Victoria traced the letters with trembling fingers while Grace stood witness to grief transformed into gratitude. "I brought her something." Victoria pulled out a small framed photo, herself and Grace at the program launch, surrounded by survivors and supporters, joy evident despite circumstances. "So she can see what her prayers built." She placed the photo against the stone, knelt in damp grass without caring about designer jeans. Grace knelt beside her, and together they talked to the woman whose faith had saved them both. Victoria from bitterness, Grace from purposelessness, both from isolation. "She would have loved this," Victoria whispered. "She does love it. Love doesn't end with death. It just changes form. Like energy. Never destroyed, only transformed." "Yeah, exactly like that." They stayed until sunset painted the cemetery in golden shadow, two daughters of different mothers united by loss, by faith, by the mysterious mathematics of grace. Driving home, Victoria asked, "Do you think we'll see them again? Our mothers?" "I choose to believe we will." "Based on what?" "Based on the same thing that brought us together, the wild possibility that love is stronger than death, that prayers echo into eternity, that endings are just beginnings we don't understand yet." Victoria reached across the console, took Grace's hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For showing me that faith isn't certainty. It's choosing to walk forward when you can't see the path, trusting that someone who loves you is lighting the way." 3 years later, Victoria stood before an auditorium of medical professionals, sharing her story at an oncology conference. Grace sat in the front row, wearing the cross that had traveled through surgery and back, now carrying both their histories in its simple shape. "Medicine saved my body," Victoria told the audience, "but friendship saved my soul. The friend who stood by me when I least deserved it, who showed me that strength can look like surrender, who taught me that prayer is just honesty dressed in hope." She found Grace's eyes in the crowd, smiled with the radiance of someone who'd walked through fire and found it had only burned away what didn't matter. "My mother used to say that we're all just walking each other home. I didn't understand then. I do now." Every person in this room is on that journey, whether patient or provider, believer or skeptic. We're all walking through valleys and mountains, through questions and revelations, through endings that become beginnings. She paused, touched the silver cross she now wore, twin to Grace's. "The question isn't whether we'll face storms. The question is whether we'll face them alone or hand in hand with others who've learned that broken places are where light enters, that scars are just proof of healing, that sometimes the greatest miracle isn't avoiding suffering but finding meaning within it." The speech ended to sustained applause, but Grace barely heard it. She was thinking of 2 women in a small apartment at 3 in the morning, one begging for prayer, the other offering it despite her own doubts. She thought of Victoria's mother and her own parents, their prayers still rippling through time like stones thrown in eternal ponds. After the conference, they drove to Grace's childhood home in Tennessee, a pilgrimage Victoria had requested for her 5th anniversary of remission. The house had been sold years ago, but the church where Grace's parents had taught Sunday school still stood. They sat in a back pew while afternoon light streamed through stained glass, painting rainbows on worn wood. "This is where they met their last night," Grace said quietly. "Bible study on the book of James. What was the lesson? Faith without works is dead." They were discussing how to live belief, not just speak it. Victoria absorbed this, then said, "They succeeded. Through you, their faith still works. Every person helped by our program is part of their legacy. And your mother's. And yours." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 friends who'd become family, 2 believers who'd found faith not in the absence of doubt, but in the presence of love that transcended understanding. That evening in the hotel, Victoria pulled out a worn envelope. "I want to show you something." Inside was her mother's letter, the one that had started everything, now soft from handling. But there was something else. A second page Grace had never seen. "I found this later, stuck to the back. Look at the date." Grace read the postscript, dated 3 days before Helen Sterling's death. "If you're reading this, Victoria, it means you found your way through the valley. I'm praying for someone to walk beside you, someone who knows what it means to lose everything and choose faith anyway. I don't know who they are, but I love them already for loving you when you can't love yourself. Tell them thank you. Tell them their parents would be proud. Tell them they're the answer to a dying mother's most fervent prayer." Grace's hands shook as she absorbed the words. How did she know? Maybe she didn't. Maybe she just trusted that love would find a way. It did. It always does. That night, they prayed together as they had hundreds of times now, but with deeper gratitude, fuller understanding of the mysterious ways grace moves through broken lives, creating beauty from ashes, hope from despair, family from strangers. The story could end here, with neat resolution and clear redemption. But life continues past convenient endings, and faith is proved not in single moments, but in daily choice to keep walking, keep believing, keep holding hands through valleys that still wait ahead. Victoria's cancer returned briefly, fought off with less drama but no less courage. Grace's sister Ruth passed peacefully in her sleep, her final words a joke about finally getting decent parking. The program they'd started grew into a nationwide network, thousands of people walking each other through darkness toward whatever light they could find or create. And in a penthouse in Manhattan, two friends still meet each morning to pray, to remember, to plan new ways of multiplying mercy in a world that desperately needs it. They wear matching crosses now, bought with the first donation to their program, inscribed with words that capture everything. Faith is the evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for, the courage to keep walking when you cannot see the way. Every morning before the city wakes, before the phone rings with new crises and celebrations, they stand at windows 42 floors above the ground and thank the one who brought them together through loss, through rage, through cancer, through a mother's prayers that echoed past death into abundant life. And somewhere, in whatever form love takes beyond the veil, two mothers smile at the daughters who finally understood that faith isn't about having answers. It's about having each other. It's about walking together through valleys and mountains, through questions and revelations, through endings that become beginnings. It's about learning that mercy multiplies when we pass it on, that grace grows by giving, that the greatest miracle isn't avoiding suffering, but finding meaning within it. It's about discovering that we're never alone, even in our darkest moments, because love transcends time and space and death itself, connecting us in ways we won't fully understand until we, too, pass from this valley into whatever waits beyond. But for now, for today, it's enough to stand together at windows, watching sunrise paint the city gold. Two friends who became sisters, two skeptics who found faith, two broken people who discovered that broken places are where light enters, where healing happens, where resurrection begins. The cross catches morning light, silver bright with promise, and they begin another day of walking each other home.